Hello, welcome to Warley Live Wednesday. Today I'm with Kathy Millatt. Sorry we're a few minutes late. We were busy yapping before we joined. I sort of lost track of time and it's 2:05 now. So what I do, I bring Kathy in. So Kathy, welcome to the stream. Welcome to the Warley live stream video.
Thanks for having me. It's brilliant to be here.
So this the first time you've been live on a video, or other than TV?
Probably. I do quite a lot of interviews, but I think people record them and then edit out the excess.
Okay, so best behaviour today. No, watch what you say. No upsetting the visitors.
I always do.
I know you. Bless you. Okay, so what do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about your YouTube channel first, and when did you get started?
Well, I look on my date and it says I started in 2010 on YouTube. So that must have been when I did my first video, but I think it's like a loco running 6 inches. It's really not exciting. And if you look at the early years, there wasn't that much. And then, gosh, I don't know when it was. It was probably 5, 6, 7 years ago now. I went to contracting as a job. So I'm a finance accountant. And I decided I had 3 months off every 12, and I set up a YouTube channel that summer when I was before starting my first contracting job, and it's been going since then properly. And I really didn't try and grow a channel. I just did what I liked, and I did something every week. I would never do anything every week again. It's just the editing, and you end up putting out quantity over quality if you're desperately always on a deadline, because modeling goes wrong all the time and you need to redo stuff. And I ended up waiting a whole week to get my back scene reprinted for their last diorama, which was Halo. So, you know, I don't like to rush my modeling like that anymore. So that was when I went into it. And now I kind of did that for 3 or 4 years. And this job, which I was in, this current contract, was coming to an end. And I thought, what shall I do? And loads of opportunities arrived. And I was like, oh, there's these people saying, do you want to do modeling for us? And it was for a famous car brand, and it was all sorts of stuff coming out. I was thinking, this is going to be really good. Yeah, I can see a future in this. It's going to be brilliant. So I didn't apply for the job full time because they were filling the contractor role. And then I decided I would part-time it for a bit. And then when the new person came in, I would stop and I would be a full-time content creator doing YouTube and other stuff. And then lockdown happened and everything disappeared.
Yeah.
Like, okay, which was fine. I mean, you just have to, you go with what you're in, don't you? So I went full-time content creation actually in August, but I was only doing 1 or 2 days a month before then. So I had a wind down from sort of March to August, and I've been doing this since then. And it's certainly been an interesting journey. Let's just put it that way. I look at YouTube all the time, and I still don't know why some videos do well and other videos that I think will do well absolutely tank and nobody watches them. And YouTube will just say, well, maybe your thumbnail or title is not very interesting. Or maybe this subject just appeals to a smaller audience. Great.
You can't work it out, can you really?
Yeah. And I never intended YouTube to be the main income, if I'm honest, because it's someone else's income, and I'm too much of an accountant to want to be reliant on Google and YouTube for my livelihood, because you hear all the horror stories of suddenly all the advertisers pull out because someone did something stupid, and you just don't want to catch yourself in that position. So I'm actually, at the same time, at the moment, I'm writing a book for Calmback, who are probably one of the largest US publishers in the model railroad space. They publish Model Railroader. They do a lot of books. If you were to look around a lot of the bookstores that import American books, you'd see them there. They're very into all of the basics, the scenery, the model baseboard basics. And they do a lot of stuff. And they've had a book in print since 1984 called How to Model Realistic Model Railroad Scenery, or How to Build Realistic Model Railroad Scenery. And it's by Dave Frary, who's one of the big American modelers. And they asked me to rewrite it, which is a real kind of privilege, and it's a real honor to be asked. And I've got a year, and that started May 15th when I was still working full time. And now I'm just trying to desperately get the last dioramas built. So I'm building stuff, not finishing it, so I can do a step-by-step of something for the book. And then they're all sitting, so I've got all these dioramas piling up on the side where I need to edit the videos and get them on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. But I'm very driven at the moment to get that book deadline, which is in a couple of months' time.
It must be quite a lot of pressure because, you know, the book's come out before, so you've got that pressure of not trying to rewrite what someone else has written, but you've got to sort of, you know, you got, do you know what I mean? It's quite difficult. It must be pressurized.
But I look back and it's interesting how much just the techniques have changed, because I have this book from probably 3 or 4 reprints ago. So it's been re-edited, or 3 editions, and it's been reprinted every couple of years. So it's one of their best-selling books. And it has all the basics for a beginner, but it has stuff for a more advanced modeler. So it aims to do everything in scenery. And that's been a real challenge because there's so many techniques that are now here. You know, I think static grass was there by the last book, but it wasn't there in the first books. It was all lichen and ground foam. And ground foam was the big new innovation. So if you were to look at the different editions since 1984, you can like track through how much just the idea of realism in model railroad scenery has changed over the years. The biggest challenge has been finding good realistic model photos. So even though I do a lot of videos, I wasn't happy with the quality of the photos on a lot of them. So I ended up redoing a lot of step-by-steps for the book. And everything now is sort of photographic step-by-steps, but that's put me way over the photo counts. I'm on the editing stage and the 2 dioramas left to build to demonstrate some of the things. Which is,
when are you hoping to get the book out into the shops?
Well, that's dependent on Calmback. So my deadline is mid-May. I think it's a year to 18 months before they get it finally printed in hard copy, because it's a proper. Here's one I have on the side. It's like this. It's this sort of size book. But you know, I'm well over on words at the moment, so I need to edit it down. So I've started to flag quite a lot of the chapters. I've got a huge section on paint, because actually one of the things I get asked a lot is, why can't I use poster paint or tempera paint, or why do you use this paint? Why do you use acrylic paint? Why don't you use enamel paint? So I did a huge section on paints and where I would personally, or where other people would use them. And I think that whole section will probably just end up being a bridge to acrylics are good because they're not smelly and they stick. I know, something really basic just to, you know, try and get the word count down. And I've got a huge section on modelling winter, which I guess will come out because,
I'm definitely going to acrylics because just for the health reasons, really. Because if you're spraying indoors and especially, you know, in the cold, you don't want the windows opened.
I know. I do this. I was never that bothered about mass until I went full time doing this for a living, because I would just spray it and then run out and shut the doors and leave that room. And now it's like my house. I was doing white spirit the other day for I was actually using this new product that Luke at Geek Gaming uses, which is it's Clear Fix by Everbuild or something, and he was using it for water. And the advantage is it's clear. It's like a silicone, but it sticks. It's not like, you know, how silicone's repellent to everything. Everything sticks to it, paint, everything, because it's acrylic based. It's a hybrid polymer. What on earth that is, I don't know. But you dilute it with either isopropyl alcohol or white spirit. My whole house stank for a week of white spirit because it was just everywhere on this diorama drying on my kitchen floor and going through the whole house. But normally when I'm spraying paints, I have my organic solvents mask on and I have a desk vent because I can't get out. The bench just isn't, it's not on a wall I can really go out on. And, you know, I shut that room and it's got an extractor fan in it. And I do it in the kitchen. I can put 2 extractor fans on there. I can have 4 extractor fans going some days and the smell is just, and I just go out and do someone else with it. But yeah, it's a real concern if you're doing it a lot. I use acrylics for 90% of stuff, but for weathering, I like enamels because you can move them afterwards. Acrylic is a once and done kind of weathering. Yeah. So I might put a dust coat on with it, but I would always do my washes and everything with enamel. But the one thing that I've sprayed a lot recently that I would never do in acrylic, because I just don't think it looks as good, is the metallics, and I use all clad lacquers for that. But also I've started to spray Tamiya, which is an acrylic. If I'm doing some of their things, I'll sometimes put those with lacquer thinners because I just think they thin better with lacquer thinners sometimes. So, and then you're cleaning those with cellulose thinners, and they just eat straight through your gloves and everything. It's horrible stuff.
I've started using lacquer thinners with enamel paints. So like the Humboldt paints, if you mix it with the lacquer thinners, it goes on a lot better than it does with enamel thinners. It just seems a lot smoother. I don't know why.
Well, Tamiya actually have a lacquer thinner. So their paints, you can buy the normal acrylic thinner, which is what you get in most stores, but you can buy a lacquer thinner online. I think I had my shit from the Far East when I got it several years ago. And so it's the same paint, acrylic lacquer. To me, is just odd. It sprays really nicely, and it's
beautiful paint.
Yeah,
beautiful paint.
Yeah.
So if the question for the beginner getting into modelling, what paint would you start with? What would you recommend to start with?
I'd start with artist acrylics because they're really easy to get. They dry nice and solid and don't come off. And I do scenery, so that's what I use 90% of my scenery on. If I was spraying a model, I would move to, I have a combination of Tamiya and Vallejo, and I use Vallejo for the range of colours, but my first coat for sticking is normally a primer. So I would start with a Halford Grey Rattle Can primer or a Tamiya fine primer if you've got it. And then once that's stuck, I'd do Tamiya if I'm airbrushing almost to the right colour, and then the final colour in Vallejo if it's not right. But I wouldn't recommend getting an airbrush till you've got a little bit further down the line. And if I was just starting out, I'd say just have a go with the basic artist acrylics for your first diorama section. And I do recommend people start with just a section of their layout, either at the back or on a separate diorama, because your first one, you'll always find your own things you'd want to do differently, and it just allows you to experiment on some techniques that are new to you. Every time I do something, it's always better the second time. So yeah. Good.
So talking about your YouTube channel, my life, you cover everything in your channel. You've got I had a quick scan through earlier, but you've got sci-fi, you've got gaming, you've got so many different techniques, how-to videos, water effects, snow, ice, summer, winter, autumn.
Yeah. I like doing new techniques. I like doing something different. So I always try and do something completely new with each diorama. But I do have my starting scenery. And what you don't see is I've had a Patreon for a couple of years now. And I've just started literally YouTube channel memberships. And so some of the things, like I just did a Halo diorama. And even if you're not a Halo person, or you've never heard of Halo, and you've no idea whether you'd like it or not, it's basically an S scale, 1/64th, which is a big American railroad scale and model railroad scale. It's an S scale diorama, which could be in the Pacific Northwest or Canada. And the only thing that makes it look alien is a metallic building with some Arduino LEDs in it. Everything else could easily just be Canadian or Pacific. It's just that kind of style. And what I find is for YouTube, you want to hit about 20 minutes at most. You don't want to be going over half an hour ever. And these huge dioramas, there's a lot of techniques in there. And I made conifer trees, and I did them with wooden dowels, which were balsa wood. I dremeled them down because I can't carve them to save my life. I just chop the top off all the time. I don't know how people carve them. I can't. So I dremel them, and I put all the wires in, and then I put on static grass, and I blew it, hair dried it down. I did that step by step on the video, and it probably was about 5 minutes. I did it again for my patrons, and because I've obviously got the footage for a much longer version and my YouTube channel memberships, and there I can put it on for like 10-15 minutes, and I can talk through it a lot more. So it's really difficult to try and get the balance between having enough that people can understand what you're doing and actually trying to keep it accessible, that the whole diorama can be watched in one sitting. And what I found is people say, why don't you break it up? You don't get the viewing figures if you break it up. And sadly, now I actually do need to earn some money from YouTube. I do need people to watch the videos.
Okay. So you've got a join page and you've got a Patreon. What's the advantages of being on your joining and being on your Patreon over just the normal content?
I do think every week I do an extra video every week. So if I look what I've put out recently, I did a diary of my week, which everyone loves seeing, but I only do it about once a year. I realized how hectic I was. I was just like, and today I did this. And it's like 50 things, plate spinning. I'm waiting for the paint to dry on this, so I'm gluing this, so I'm doing this. And then I was just like, oh, Kathy, you need to slow down. So that was one thing, but normally I would do a step-by-step. So they've had bushes, and I did about 8 or 9 different types of bushes, how to do them step-by-step. They're all very much similar technique, but different bases, you know, plumber's hemp, pastiche, polyfiber, rubberized horsehair, loads of static grass versions. So loads of, and that was a step-by-step on bushes, you know, beginning to end, some of the options, quick like tip ones. I often do, I record everything I do. And so when I do something like the Halo one, as I said, there'll be the Halo Pines, but I did a much longer version. For the, I don't know if you've seen it, I've been on Instagram, but nowhere else. I've just done a speedboat with a massive wake because I wanted to do foil waves for the book. And one of the techniques I did in that was I just masked the windows out to paint them. So I'm going to do a step-by-step on masking for painting. Okay. You know, so but that won't even be in the YouTube video. In the YouTube video, I'll just go, I masked the windows for speed, but I'll do a step-by-step on some of the things you need to know about how you mask things so it doesn't bleed. Yeah. So that kind of thing. So I'm always looking when I'm doing videos. The other thing is just, you'll see a lot of me doing my railway. And my railway, we talked about it before we went on air. My railway is a New Haven model railroad. It's US, it's up in my loft. And it has awful lighting and viewing sign. You just can't video up there. Because you can't get the angles, you can't get the close-ups, you can't put a big heavy camera for videoing on finished scenery. So the further you get along with it, the harder it becomes to video it well. And I want to improve my production quality on my videos all the time. Every video I look to do something better. So what and there are different cameras I could use and there's ways around it. But what I tend to do is take those dioramas downstairs and work on them. But what you'll see on, say, the extra channels is me working on my railroad or me sat at a desk and maybe a time lapse of me and I'll talk through. So before the Halo one came out, I did a time lapse of how I do foundational bases from beginning to end. And in the Halo video itself, it would have been shorter. So I try and do something different. I talked about my influences recently, did a video on that. But I polled everybody last week to ask what their favourites were. And Step-by-Steps came out by far the favourite video for them. So I'm always looking to find a step-by-step, even if it's not on the YouTube channel. And I do separate ones for them, just film for them. So something every week, extra video. And I just spend a lot of time as well talking to people who, especially patrons. The YouTube channel doesn't really have the chat in the same way, but Patreon, you have messaging. So a lot of people join in the hope that I'll be able to help them with their models. So I do try and help that. And, you know, people ask me questions and I might do a video on it. So someone asked me about paint and colour blindness and paint and, you know, how to choose colours. So I did 2 videos, one on different types of paint and one on colours and how you might choose colours and how colour science works and the, you know, additive, subtractive, just some of the basic stuff and how to go about choosing colours, which is also in my planning book. So I'd written the chapter on it. It worked really well. So I've just done it. So I do whatever videos people want. So if people want a certain subject, I'll go. There's going to be one on 3D printing, a series of that coming out, which will be after the starting scenery course on YouTube, but will go on Patreon probably 6 months to a year earlier. But I've just got so much else on with the book that it's probably going to be the summer before I start it.
That's something I'm very interested in is 3D printing, because it seems to be the latest in thing. So how did you get into 3D printing and CAD work? Do you do your own CAD work or?
Yeah, I do. So how did I get into it? Well, you just have to look at any YouTube video and people are starting to use it now. So I was seeing more and more people using it. And then when I was on the Great Model Railway Challenge, I had a chat with quite a few people there over the time who had resin printers, or somebody actually brought their printers there and went through it. So, you know, there was loads of 3D printing sort of discussions there. And I came back off the first series actually and bought a little Anycubic photon, which is subsequently broken. And yeah, I could never get it to level, but when it did, it printed beautifully and it did great stuff that's bespoke that you can't get any other way. And that's what sold me on it. So I've actually got 3 printers now. And I probably would recommend anybody starting in our arena to start with something like an Elegoo Mars or an Anycubic photon. I actually moved to Elegoo Mars because I was annoyed at my photon, but you know, other people can't get theirs to. I think it's just they're Chinese, and you just have to accept that every one of them every now and then. One doesn't work very well, but they do beautiful prints, and the quality is excellent. And you can do 25 microns. Is it 0.025 of a millimeter or 0.25 of a millimeter? They're just so fine, and they're beautiful. You know, faces and things like that. You know, just anything, even in small. You can't beat it. Yeah. And there's so many free designs on the internet. You don't even have to be able to do CAD. So I'd start with a small resin one, but having got a small resin one, I kept wanting to print bigger stuff because the vats on them are about this big. You know, you're not going to get a lot in there. And if you're looking to print anything really large, you're going to end up butting against that. So before I became unemployed and moved to this new job, I bought a Pioppoli Phenom, which is phenomenal. It's massive. It's like up here. It's got a 400, so that's, you know, well over a foot height on it. That'll probably take you days to get up there. And it's got I've never had a problem with it. It prints beautifully. I've had a few leaks because it's got so much pressure on it. And one of my vats, I've actually got 2 vats, leaked. So I've gone to the second vat and it's been fine since I moved to that. And it's just been brilliant. And I love that print, but it's not cheap. You know, every hour costs money, and the resin's not particularly cheap. And you're doing huge volumes, so you notice the price. So yes. I'd had a filament printer I'd bought not long after the first resin one, and I had a Anycubic Mega, i3 Mega. And then I wanted to print ABS because I like the idea of being able to sand ABS, because PLA doesn't really sand, and glue it with normal plastic thin cements. And, you know, just I like the processing of ABS. It's a pain to print, but I like the processing it. So you have to put an enclosure around it because it hates drafts and variations in temperature. And I put a full enclosure around out of foam core, and I melted my printer effectively. Bits actually melted. I thought it was 45 degrees. Electronics don't like that. It was never happy after that. So I got a presser around Black Friday sales last year, and it printed all right until I had blocked the nozzle with some filament I think was a bit old. And then I changed the nozzle. It's never printed well. So this week I've actually been trying to get that to print better, because I want to print a full-size, life-size battle droid from Star Wars. You know, the Roger Rogers. Yeah. I want to print a full-size one of those. That's kind of on the cards, but I need to save up for it first. So, is it going
to be a future build then, a battle droid?
Pardon?
Is that going to be a future build in diorama?
Yeah.
Can't wait to see that.
Yeah, I think it'd be good. I just, so I'm trying to get it tuned. And this is what I'd say about 3D printing. If you're buying even an expensive 3D printer, there's still a lot of hot or liquid moving parts that can go wrong. So if you're a typical model railroader, you're already used to electronics, you're already used to tinkering, you're probably going to be fine. Even with my brand new presser, within 2 weeks, had it apart and rebuilt the hot end and put a new nozzle on and soaked it in acetone and cleared it and all that kind of stuff. You know, straight off, you have to expect that it won't necessarily work as you expect, and that things will go wrong. And so they don't come out the box and work in the way you would perhaps expect with a printer. But once you've got them dialed in and you've understood the basics, they do print beautifully. And I wouldn't be without mine now. I use the filament one for cheapness. So for big items, you just have to expect to sand a lot, and components. So I've used it for track work and under track components for some my port in Norway. You better not mention that, it's not going very far. And you know, just loads and loads of other componenty type robustness because of the ABS. And then I use the resin for everything else, depending on size, which one it goes in. And I just wouldn't be without them. I use them on almost every project because I've got them. But you asked about CAD. And I think one of the key things is you don't need to be good at CAD. Thingiverse, My Mini Factory, they have thousands of designs in HO or 00 or whatever it is you want. And you can rescale very simply in print software. You just have to, I don't know, times it by 87.5 and divide by 76.5 or whatever it is you want to do. So they're very, very simple to do. You know, it's not like you have to know electronics. But once you've got to the stage of, I want to print this building or I want this chimney and I want it to be exactly like that, you will end up having to use your own software and design them. And there are loads of free software. You don't need to spend any money. I've used Fusion 360, which I use for engineering pieces, because you can do it down to the, I don't know, 0.0001 millimeter if you want. You can get it really fine. I don't think your printers are that good, but you can get it spot on. And I use Blender for just everything else, organic, and Blender copes better with large meshes because of it's just the way it's made. So I find I often start in Fusion 360 for the accuracy and then move to Blender for the finishing, for the textures and everything else. Though I'm struggling with brickwork. I still haven't found a good way of doing brickwork. I need to learn a few more things about how Blender does procedural mapping and texturing and stuff. So still working on all that.
Brickwork's very hard to get it to look right, isn't it really? It's I suppose it's quite a dark art really to make brick.
The problem is just you end up with so many faces that the programs fall over because you've overtaxed them, because you've just got so many different cuts to it. It's quite simplistic, which is why I want to learn how to do it in Blender, because Blender applies it in a different way. So it will just go, oh, I'm a texture, and apply it, and it applies it really much more simply. So it doesn't become unworkable. So if I use an example, I'm doing a brick building with corbels along the top. If I've got 91 corbels down one side. If I put those on an array, so you do one, and then just the rest are all calculated. It only ever does the size of that one. It just knows it's got to repeat it 91 times. Okay. If you apply that because you want to cut it up, it adds an extra 0 in complexity. So it went from 116 meg to 2 gig, the file, and just fell over all the time. So, you've got to, once you go down that route, there are some really good basic programs you need to start learning to do that. But brick's quite hard, that's all I say.
Would you consider going to like the laser cutting and laser board?
I'd love one. I looked at a Glowforge when I was getting the Peopoly Phenom, and I went with a bigger 3D printer instead. And that was because of this type of stuff that I do. So my Mandalorian was printed on the Peopoly Phenom, and I couldn't do that on a laser cutter, and I couldn't have fitted it on the Elegoo Mars. And that's the kind of thing that I bought the printer for. I almost have enough space in my house to get a laser printer in, but I've got a couple of concerns. One, Glowforges look great, but they're £1,000 shipping to this country, and nobody sells them in this country. And then they're bespoke software. So if they wanted to lock you in, you're stuffed, you wouldn't be able to use it. And I probably would just have to look at another brand and just see. And it's just space and time and money. And I don't have any of those at the moment. Yeah.
So going back to, I know you mentioned trees earlier. One of the videos I really, really enjoyed was the tree where you had the 4 different seasons. So you had summer, winter, autumn. That was amazing to see the individual sections. And
if I can confess though, I do some videos for Model Railroad Video Plus, and they'd asked me to do autumn. I absolutely it's one of the worst dioramas I've ever done in my life. I hated it. I redid it, and it was when I'd just gone full time to this, and I wasn't earning enough money off it, and I was panicked about the fact I wasn't earning any money because I'd just gone from a really well-paid job to nothing. And I couldn't get it to work, and I kept redoing it, and it looked worse. And I was just like, oh, so the last thing I really wanted to do again so soon was autumn. But I'd had this idea for this, and actually this time around I was able to learn from the previous autumn that was so bad. I'm really sorry, MRVP viewers who see that video. It was all fine, more or less, until I got to the trees, and then it just went downhill. The earth and the rock faces and the bridges were perfect, and then it was just the trees.
Yeah, but leaves that changing colours are very difficult to get right, because you've got so many different colours involved and textures, and it
is. And I tried some new techniques, and I'd done wire trees for them, and then I just didn't have enough bulk on them, so they looked awful. So I ended up just putting polyfiber over the top like I did for this. So having had that learning point, I just went straight to polyfiber this time. But I used the brown polyfiber, which works better in autumn. And I use the ground foam now. At one point, I wasn't putting... scale leaves are quite hard for autumn. But because that one was sponsored by Knox, they sent me theirs, but they're too bright. for UK, and this was a UK oak tree. Whereas before I was trying to do it was New Hampshire mountainside, and they're just so bright. They look wrong to my eyes because I never know whether the photographer has just gone woof on the saturation and whether they really are that right. And people say they are, but I've never been to New England in the fall, and obviously our trees are slightly more chilled.
Yeah, we've got an American style layout in the club room. I don't know if you've seen it. The upstairs and the trees are nattered like autumn, and they're very sort of garish. It's just like okay.
Yeah. And actually, I think they are. I think one of the things that people do wrong with autumn, and I did this, so I know this. They do the tree all in one colour. So they've got an orange tree or a red tree, but when you look at them, they're never all one colour. There's some green in there, some yellow in there, and they only really go all one colour right at one point, but then not all the trees are at the same point. I just didn't balance it right, and I think autumn is really hard. Having said that, winter is also quite a pain because it's just getting that bulk of twigs.
Yeah.
How do you get the twigs to look good in scale? And we always use just anything with static grass now, but it's about getting that not to look like a toilet brush on the end of your branch, because it can just look bad. I've started to use a hairdryer quite a bit to blow it in the right direction, static grass, and I found that to be really good. That was a Gordon Gravett tip. So thanks, Gordon.
Okay. So your modelling inspirations, who do you take inspiration from, and what other YouTube channels do you like to watch?
Now that's two completely different questions.
Absolutely.
When I started modelling, YouTube didn't exist. So I spent a lot of time on railroad line forums, which still has superb craftsman kit modelling. And my biggest probably influence was Bob Van Gelder, who ran South River Model Works, who do craftsman kits. So these are all board by board wooden kits, but they're mostly New England mills, and I was modelling New England. I own every one of his kits, and if you've seen the prices at the time I bought them, thankfully the dollar was 2 to 1, because some of them are very pricey. And I love, he actually models a prototype and he puts photos in and shows where he got it to. And I went on holiday throughout the region. I actually went and found some of the prototypes and took photos of the real thing. So, and his models are little versions of real places, and that really appeals to me. So he was a big Bob, and when you get the book, I haven't got one with me here. When you get the sort of instruction booklet, it's this thick, and it's a complete primer on how to do scenery, everything, water, just all the. It's almost like a how to build realistic model railroad scenery. It's just brilliant. I learned so much from him. And Scotty Mason did some DVDs back then, and he had a DVD that he did with Bob Van Gelder on scenery. All of my early scenery techniques came from him. So he was probably one of the great influences on how I model. And he's modeling fall, and his looks really good. And I've been to his layout, which is mostly just his dioramas in place at the moment. Because obviously when you're working full time, doing a layout can be quite hard. Yeah. And so he was a big influence. I also went to visit Trollskirk, who did the coastline, which is ON30, and he's an artist. And the way he approached his layout, it is a work of art. It's probably the most beautiful layout I've ever visited. And I've visited a lot of layouts in the US, and his is hands down probably the most just artistically beautiful. It's stunning. And then more recently, I'd say Lance Mintime, who is very much an advocate of space and leaving space for models to breathe and that kind of thing. And we're all in danger of trying to put too much in. And he's very much just green space in between or whatever colour it is. And he's, obviously Pelle Soberg, who is, I've been to visit his layout as well, name dropping here, but I did both him and Trolls on a trip to Copenhagen. And they're just both all wonderful modelers. Really, really honoured to have met them. So they were like my historic ones. And that was when I was modelling the New Haven a lot. Then I started YouTube a lot more, and the YouTube channel. And like everybody, I watch Luke Towan. I email him because we're both content creators, or whatever you want to call us now. We both do YouTube. So I talk to him about YouTube quite a bit. And he's been really helpful. He's a lovely guy. And his quality of his videos and his modelling is just, he is the bar, and nobody comes close. But he's so helpful in sharing, and I just have so much respect for him and what he's done. But when I look at who I actually watch, my favourite new person, and these are little Star Wars dioramas, if you like Star Wars, Boylei Hobby Time, Boylei Hobby Time, and he does amazing things with LEDs, with like blasters and TIE fighters fighting, and he does a little diorama most weeks, and he's just really very small, very simple, and very well done. You know, just simple concepts that.
Yeah.
So I like them. Real Terrain Hobbies, you know, Black Magic Craft do terrain. Luke from Geek Gaming Scenics, they do terrain. Now, terrain is for fighting over. It's, you know, wargaming, so it's a lot more robust. But they try a lot of techniques that are really useful, like using foam bricks. And actually, I noticed Luke mentioned Black Magic Craft in his one with the Iron Gorge bridge.
Yeah.
That's not what it's called, but you know what I mean. He, you know, he mentioned that, and he'd got the large stones that he did from there. So I follow quite a few terrain people because they do some fascinating experiments, and they often put out weekly videos, so you can pick up some techniques and go, oh, that looks really interesting. And Real Terrain's done some amazing stuff with water, and he used Woodland Scenic Snow in it. So I did that on my latest one just because I saw it there. So I do that. I just have so many that kind of pop past, and I watch for a bit and then I stop. I'm on Scalathon at the moment, because he does amazing water and some post-apocalyptic. Nerdforge, somebody recommended, so I've been looking at them.
Very good channel.
Yeah, so I blip around and watch. Just did Peter McKinnon, because everybody says you've got to go and look at Peter McKinnon. He's very engaging and he's very uplifting, so you kind of watch those. Tested have some great stuff. I want to do Book Nooks, having seen Norman Chan's. I haven't seen his latest one, but he's just done the Iron Giant, I think. You know, there's loads of really interesting stuff on Tested that you can just apply. So whatever it is, I like to look in different hobbies. So if I want to know how to do dust, I'll go and just look at dust in YouTube. When I was doing the speedboat and I wanted to do foil waves, I knew I wanted to do foil, but I couldn't work out how to paint the foil. And so I found this channel that did it, and they do amazing stuff. So yeah, I probably spend every day probably about half an hour to an hour on YouTube looking at what people are doing, how they're doing it, seeing will that technique work for me, and using it. But I still go back to all my scenery basics. There was a recent article in Model Railroad where someone had found tile grout because they'd gone to the DIY shop, and I was like, oh, I think I was using that like 15 years ago. I wonder who told me to use it. I have no idea, but these things go around, and then people don't use them for a bit, and then somebody says, oh, tile grout's really good, and then everyone uses tile grout for a bit, and they just come and go in waves. And I still use tile grout on almost every diorama, and I look back and it's on some of my earliest dioramas. Some of the first things I ever did have got tile grout on them. So obviously someone very early on said, yeah, that's a good one.
Absolutely. I've started using Postcrete because it works similar to tile grout, but you get quite a nice soily soil, and you got bits of grit in it as well. So if you use the like a colander and sieve it through to get the size you want for the scale, it does work quite well. And you get.
What do you do to colour it though? Because the reason I use tile grout is it's brown all the way through, or it's beige for sand, or it's taupe, or it's terracotta for a Mars. Whatever it is, I use it for the colour as much as the texture.
It's like a grey brown, so it's quite a good dirty, soily.
Yeah.
You can use the saws scatters on top to give it a bit more colour, but it gives it a nice textured base. It's worth a try. I'll give you
next get out to a shop.
I've got a 2.5 ton bag in me. I'm never going to use it all, so if I see you next, I'll bring you a bag full.
That would be really good. I mean, I went through a 5 kilo bag of tile grout, my first brown. It was all over my first 2 layouts, and it's, spread all over them. I used it up and I couldn't find it again. It was perfect. I really miss it. It was Unibond brown, but it had quite a gritty texture. Yeah. I find a lot of the grout you get nowadays unsanded. So the glue just balls on the surface, and you need to add quite a bit of sand to get it to flow. Yeah. I used real soil as well sometimes. Sorry, go on.
Okay. So going back to what you said earlier, you were quite a high pressure job in finance. How does it feel to go from being in a high pressure job, people working for you, to now working for yourself just doing modelling, and how do you it must be difficult every morning. You've got to, it's quite a big position.
Well, it's weird because lockdown happened at the same time. I'd already worked from home one day a week, generally on Friday because of traffic, because I was shooting over to Worcester and I'm in Solihull. So it was, that bit of the world's just a nightmare on a Friday night. So I was used to working sort of one day a week at home. I'm now at home 7 days a week and my workplace is my home. I have a 3-bed semi. It's not, it's not massive. It's not small. When you put a business in it as well, it is just rammed full of stuff. I don't have enough storage so I can find things. I keep rebuying things because I can't find them. So there's been a lot of interesting bits about going from having a chatty environment where I would have meetings a lot of the time. I had some really great people I chatted, and I still talk to my old boss and some of my old staff regularly. I still talk to them, but it's kind of not the same. So that's the weirdest one, is going from being this really chatty round people all the time to being on your own at home. But then there's a constant stream of people trying to get attention on social media for either I've laid my track and I've now put ballast on it, I don't know what to do next sort of thing, through to, I've said something and they're trying to give me help for stuff I've got stuck on. So 3D printing help, always received gratefully. So there's a constant stream of social media, but it's not the same as actually chatting. And I'm very wary about putting anything particularly on social media, just because it goes around and it's just kind of, So I found that quite weird. And then there's no boundary from your work. So when I did my diary for the week, which I did for this vlog, I started on a Sunday actually, and I work Sunday mornings, and I'm doing a Blender course at the moment to try and improve my texturing and stuff. I'm doing the donut course. If you want to start Blender, the donut course is the famous one. And I've done a few sort of things like that on a Sunday morning. I'll often do modeling. If any stuff that needs to dry, I'll get the glue down. And then I try and have Sunday afternoon off. So I now play video games as my hobby, because my hobby was modeling, but now it's my job. And then I work most evenings. So most evenings I'll be doing computer design work. So I'm doing a building at the moment. And then in the day, I do start a bit later than I used to, because I don't have to drive over and I don't rush out of bed in the same way. But I'm still up at 7 every day. And then I work till pointless. So I've got my routine, pointless, and then I go and start on the computer in the evening. But, there's nothing to stop you working. And it's all some stuff you find it's not all stuff you find enjoyable. I don't know anybody who really enjoys video editing. I need to meet somebody who wants to edit my videos, because it's okay, but so there's stuff around the job that just isn't as exciting. It's like anything. But what I find is there's no off switch, because I might just come back. So last night I came back at 9:30, spent 3 hours trying to get my building to split, because I'd fixed the array as a take that I was talking about it, and it was shot up a size and will fall over. So I spent quite a lot of time trying to get this building sliced into 3 chunks so I could print it, because I deliberately put it all in one place, but then it made it too big. So that was my stupidity. And there's learning all the time when you're doing stuff like that, because there's still new programs to me and there's so much to learn. So I just find I don't turn off. I mean, Christmas was kind of where I realised once I get past the book, I'm going to start taking holidays, because my last holiday was March, and then Christmas, I worked Christmas morning, did Christmas, worked through because I wanted to get the Mandalorian Tatooine diorama out before New Year, got that done. And then I had 3 days learning Blender, and then I went back to work again. And it was just like, you need a break. So I think if you're a very driven person like I am, there is a danger. This is a hobby. I really enjoy what I do, but I need to just kind of learn to dial it back a bit at times. And also, I'm not really earning any money yet. So that's the one thing everyone's always fascinated about, is people making money on YouTube. So shall I talk a bit about that? Because people think you make loads of money. I don't. Let's put it that way. YouTube, I mean, some of my videos will make £20, £40. They tend to be the smaller ones, but you can literally make less than it costs you to get the pieces of the glue, the paint, the ground foam, the scale leaves, whatever it is. You can earn less money than that. And if you want to eat as well, that's just not happening.
Absolutely.
One of the problems is, I mean, I've got 56,000 subscribers, I think, at the moment. That's not enough. You need to have way more than that. But it's not just about subscribers, it's about views. You can have a couple of hundred subscribers, but if nobody watches that video, you don't earn any money off it.
Yeah.
So YouTube drives you to put more and more videos out to try and feed the funnel, but you don't necessarily earn that much money. So for me, YouTube has never been the aim. It's just one channel. So when I went into this, I had the view, I'd write the Calm Back book for my first year, which would give me structure. It would also help me refresh all my basics, because I would be doing all of the basics through from, you know, groundwork through to trees, seasons, regional variations. It's all in there. And I would have to do something on every of them, water again, you know, just stuff that I've done all once, but actually I now need to redo or refresh or check. And, you know, Dave Ferry had some very sweeping statements in like ballast. This was one of my favorites. He went, and I don't disagree with it. He said, and of course, real stone ballast is the only way to go. It works far better than anything else. And I think he was thinking of Woodland Scenics because it's made from walnut, so it's very light. And I was just like, I've never used real stone ballast. I've only ever used Scenics. And that was my entire layouts are all done in them. I can't now do other bits in another cup. I actually bought 2 packets for the book to take a photo of them. Yeah. But I use them at the bottom of rivers and stuff. It's sort of like, you know, I only use Woodland Scenics Grey Blend. That's just what I use. So I've had to actually go and ballast and track just for the book. And I'm having to redo water because the quality on my videos that I have isn't quite high enough for the book. I just don't like the framing of the shots and the number of pixels, basically, because they were done in HD rather than 4K. And I record everything in 4K now, and I put it up in YouTube in 4K, so at least it's there. And if you're taking in 4K, you can get quite a crop in as well for the book if you need to. The biggest problem with your video is you lift it out of scene, you lift it up to work on it. So you kind of need a bigger frame, or to be constantly checking that it's in frame and in focus. So I kind of had the book for the first period, and books don't pay you a huge amount, but you know, it's structure and it's there, and eventually, hopefully, it will pay money in the future. And then I've got a view that I'll sell T-shirts. I tried doing drop shipping, but with all the VAT changes with Brexit, and then everything went out of stock, I moved to Teespring, which is you can put on your shelf on YouTube so people can buy it off YouTube. And I think I looked at it and I put it on about mid-November, December time. And I was just like, oh, I've not heard anything. I've obviously not made any money on it. Oh, well, it didn't take me long. I'd already got it on the other one. Then I looked and I'd made $90. It may not sound like a lot, but that is a lot in my...
Yeah.
So, you know, it is literally about putting about 7 or 8 different ways of getting money, whether it's Patreon, the YouTube channel memberships, YouTube advertising, T-shirts. I do want to start selling products, but because I'm doing Carmack, I haven't got the bandwidth to do them. So I am writing ebooks later this year, starting with a starting scenery one, and then I'm going to do 3D printing for modelers. And then, you know, I might do some templates and, you know, tutorials, written things. I mean, I try and use every bit of content at least 2 or 3 times. So, you know, if I've got how to do a conifer, it's gone in the book. It'll probably go in the starting scenery book. It's gone on a video. It's gone on Halo. So I'll probably use that 4 or 5 times because it was really useful, basic stuff. But it's just about getting loads of little amounts in, and you have to build it up slowly. And, you know, I had a well-paid job. I reached that point where finance was my first career, but I never thought it'd be my only career. So if I don't give it a go now, when will I? My mortgage is paid off. I'm just going for it. I've also, at the same time, with lockdown, hardly spent any money. And it is about, you just don't spend as much money. You have to. Yeah. I mean, I live in sweatshirts now. So it's not like I spend any money on clothes. I've got wardrobes of clothes I don't need anymore. So it's just about, you've got to cut your cloth according to what you earn. But if people ask me about becoming a content creator, I would definitely say I've really loved it, but I am somebody who believes you have to be happy where you are. So I really love this sort of phase where I've got loads on. I'm really pushing myself to try new things. I'm enjoying it. I'd like to just have a little bit more regular income coming in, so I felt that I could meet my bills at least. But it will take time if it's going to happen. And if not, well, I've been a finance contractor before. I'm used to being unemployed and going out and getting jobs. I've still got all those contacts. Just go and do a 6-month finance contract if I have to. But I couldn't do the YouTube channel as well. It's just, it gets too much. You just can't do both easily.
You need a bit of downtime as well, don't you?
Yeah. So that's the kind of the roadmap, is to start having products, and then I don't need to rely on YouTube for anything other than just people knowing the products exist.
So going back to your merchandise, you've mentioned t-shirts. What else have you got for sale?
Well, Teespring does t-shirts, mugs. The mugs have been quite popular, and sort of sweatshirts and things like that. So I've got that with them because they just do all the VAT, they do all the selling, and they just send me a commission, which is so much easier.
Yeah.
For physical products, I haven't got enough space to store my Targa out. I don't want to be putting books here as well. I've got a couple of digital downloads on my website, but nothing really that exciting yet. My aim is to start writing ebooks that are, people will be interested in. I'd like to bring one out every sort of 6 months to a year. And they're sort of, I'm going to start with some basics, but I've got some ideas. 3D printing is definitely a question I get asked about a lot. And just things that people will find useful. And you can get them on print on demand as well. So maybe I look at putting them on hardback, and not hardback, but, sort of proper paper. If I start going to shows and things, should they miraculously appear again in the future? So that's kind of the roadmap on where I want to go on those. But at the moment, the merchandise is mostly just this, and it's getting there. People are buying it. I think the measure twice, cut once one. And I'm not old. I'm just weathered. My two best sellers.
So talking about shows, you've always been to our show. Well, every time I've been there, I'm sure I've seen you there.
Yeah.
Are you missing going to shows and meeting people and talking to people?
It's an interesting one. I dialed back a lot on shows when I got my YouTube channel. And the reason for that is when you're working full time, when do you model? Weekends. If you go to shows, you're not modeling. Yeah. And I was trying to put a video out every week. So there's this real piece about time. At the moment, because I'm modeling all week, I always had thought when I moved to this new life that I would go to shows and I'd be able to meet people and perhaps do some demos and talk about things and, just work in that kind of area. But in reality, I'd not been for a few years apart from to Warley, just because I was so busy trying to do YouTube. And I don't think people realize who don't do the video editing. I can spend as long editing the video as I can doing the work. Yeah. Sometimes it's not quick. And it's not just the video. You have to edit the video. You have to redo the sign, color grade if you're into that sort of stuff. But then you also need to do the beauty shots at the beginning and end and the beauty videos. You voice over everything, or you record it at the time. So you have to do that sort of thing. And then you have to do all the social media posts, all the blog posts. I have to get all the Amazon links so I can pay less than 20 quid a month on Amazon. So, but, I put Amazon links on, and you just go through and go through the motions on all these things. And it can take a day just to get a video out the door from it being actually up on YouTube to getting all the associated other stuff. And I'm trying to post on Instagram every day so that there's something. And then I'll remember at 10 o'clock at night I haven't done anything. So I'm going, photos. I model most days, but, it's, time seems to fly. So I would like to go to shows to actually talk to real people about things. I've always found watching other people's work really important and inspirational. And I know people might say, oh, you've been modeling for a long time. What can you learn? You can learn something from every one you go to, whether it's just the way they've done the backdrop, something about even just the sign on it. Sometimes you look at it and go, wow, it's an amazing sign, or wow, I love that person, or I love how you've done this. I love that colorway. Just there's something on every single layout you can learn from and talk to the person about. And I miss that opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've missed interacting with people and talking to people, and that's why we started the Warley Wednesday. So it's nice just once a week to be able to sit down with someone and have just a good natter, really, and have a chat, which is good, really. You've also mentioned traveling, so I'm guessing you've traveled a lot and seen a lot of the, as a US modeler, I'm guessing you've seen a lot of the 50 states of America.
I think I've done 35 of them. I don't know if that's a lot or not. I'm missing kind of the top middle-ish and the bottom sort of rights. So yeah, some of the East Coast and mostly the middle. But no, I actually went and did just a few states, just to say I'd done a few states the other year. Yeah. So instead of going to Florida, I flew into Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and drove down and spent a week driving down through those 7 states, went to New Orleans and places like that. And I do like traveling. I think in my new lifestyle, traveling was one of the things that had to bite the dust just because of money. Yeah. It isn't cheap. And I was due to fly to New Zealand 2 days before we locked down last year as a convention. I was supposed to be the lead speaker at their convention, and it just didn't happen. So, yeah. But, you know, I saved the money. And, yeah.
Absolutely.
I got the money back. That's the important thing with COVID, isn't it? I got the money back out of my holiday.
Yeah.
So
you still managed to spend it, though, before.
Yeah, well, I bought a resin 3D printer instead. The thing about traveling is I like modeling. I like the American modeling. I just really like the quirkiness of it. When I got back in, I had a UK model railway to start with, and when I actually went to New England, it's like, this isn't as I thought. So sometimes when you visit places, you do go, that isn't quite, you know, as I thought. But besides the scenery, the one thing that traveling in the US enabled me to do is visit an awful lot of layouts, because I'd be going for conventions where the layouts are open, but also before and afterwards, I'd be visiting friends of friends and seeing their layouts. And I have seen some absolutely stunning, we're talking basement empires that are beyond any of my dreams, and just really good quality as well. And some of these people are sort of the top names. So I have seen George Selis's FSM, Dick Elwell's, Bob Van Gelder, as I mentioned. But, you know, even people like Peter Youngblood, who used to do modelling with the masters at the conventions, his is just stunning. And you go around and there's some absolutely amazing modellers that I've been able to see in person. And in America, they don't come out to shows. That's not how they exhibit their work. But they open up their layouts a lot more, because often their basements are accessible from the outside and they're separate to the house. And, you know, but I've had people, you know, have me around for an evening just to chat. It's a wonderful community to be a part of, and it opens so many doors. And if you were going to the US, and, you know, the NMRA will often have a list of people in the area, or they'll be able to put you in touch with the region or local division who would be happy to, normally, obviously, it's not at the moment, to have you around. Yeah. And, you know, it's just opened so many doors for me. And I got to go to some really weird places. How many people go to Cleveland, Ohio, you know, for a convention? Just, yeah, okay. So I've been to some odd places as well. I spent a bit of time in Kansas City. That's the second largest railroad city in America. And it's just amazing. I went around to Stephen Priest. And yeah, it was really, really good. Had a great time there. So, yeah, it opened a lot of doors. And I doubt I would have been writing this book for Calmback or doing my YouTube channel in quite the same way if it wasn't for that. But yeah.
So do you prefer US modelling or UK modelling? So what's your favourite?
I like US because it's different. I caught a train to work or school or whatever every day. So the UK ones are commonplace to my mind. Having said that, I'm doing a North Wales slate layout as well. But I just like the American style of modelling. But I like the fine scale of British modelling. So what I'm always drawn to, wherever it is good modelling, realistic modelling, people who have a story to tell, who tell it well, who use, you know, great creativity, whether it's putting a corrugated roof on the top of their layout so it looks, you know, there was that exhibition where it had a corrugated thing. Well, it's something like that. It's just a little bit quirky, or someone used a saw as the nameplate and they've, you know, Camp 93 on it. Whatever it is, I like quirky, original little things. But what you've noticed, and you mentioned this at the beginning, is I'm actually seeing quite a lot of sci-fi creep into my modelling at the moment. And ironically, my best viewed videos are all in the video game sci-fi arena, which is interesting. And that's partly because, you know, I grew up on Doctor Who, Blake Seven, you know, that is very much something I've done. And when I went to doing videos for YouTube, I did model railways. but my loft layout became almost inaccessible. I was talking about video sightlines. You really struggle to video up there. And it also becomes very episodic. And that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to create beautiful pieces of almost art or modeling, one whole project at a time. And that's what I wanted to do when I became a content creator, was to create beautiful but finished dioramas, rather than an episode you have to watch 100 of before you get to the final scene. And I could have put Halo out over 3 or 4 weeks, but instead I chose to do it once in one, and I think it's a better story as a result. So what I'm really keen on is whatever I do is slightly original, slightly quirky, and has really good realistic modeling. So even the Halo one, as I said earlier, loads of stuff model railways in there that you can take away from it. My Mandalorian, I sprayed metallics. If you need to spray metallics, it's a good way to look at that. You're looking at the Tatooine diorama if you're doing deserts, or you want to do Adobe buildings because you're doing like America. Yeah, there's techniques in there, the tar grout and sand and PVA basically works really well for that. So all of the techniques that are in there, how to weather, how to do, they're all just so transferable across all the modeling. And that's what I've always liked to do. Is I used to spend a lot of time looking at military modeling because I love their weathering. Their weathering is just amazing. So I was very early into all the MIG products, AK Interactive, all that kind of stuff. And I really appreciate what they have brought into the model railway hobby. But actually, I just like doing new things. So if I look at my dioramas that are coming up, a lot of them are realistic railroad stuff for the book. And I'm starting to do some of the Craftsman Kit stuff now, which may end up on YouTube in a year or two when I get around to it. But I've got a fun fair to do. I've bought all the stuff to do a fun fair, and I just haven't got around to it. And I'm really looking forward to doing a fully lit LED'd fun fair, with moving stuff. So there's a load of things. I want to do underwater scene, just probably a Lara Croft, because not many ready model railways underwater, are there? But, just I like doing that kind of interesting things as well. Yeah. So I try and keep them sort of equal, but actually the Four Seasons Oak that I didn't get great viewing figures. It didn't do it. But Halo, great viewing figures. So you just have to hit whatever.
You can't predict it, can you? Really, you just put out what you enjoy, and hopefully other people will enjoy it as well.
I was watching someone who said, he's over 1 million subscribers, and he said, my best video is still me unboxing an electric bike with my son. And I have no idea why that one video is so popular, but it still makes me loads of money now. And he said, and I don't know why it's that one. What is it about that one video that just everybody wants to watch?
It's strange. So you talked a lot about, obviously, different types of builds. So do you prefer to do the small dioramas in terms of videos, because you can do varied content and different things?
And I can finish them. I am very good at planning and starting stuff, less good at seeing it all the way to finish if it's too big, because I just run out of time. So this way I actually finish stuff. And I don't think they need to be big dioramas to get a point across. So my speedboat one, which has got the wake, which you won't have seen, it will be up soon. It's only about this big. Which way is it? That way. It's only about that big, but it's a slightly under HO scale boat. And it's just, it was for a technique really, but I'll do a YouTube video out of it. And it was great fun to do. It was really interesting to try something completely new, doing the middle of an ocean with a big speedboat wake. And, I'm running out of space. I'm going to have to do some smaller dioramas. It's just, where do you put it all? I've got bookshelves of them. Yeah,
but I suppose when you've got a smaller diorama, you're more focused then, aren't you? So you've got that almost attention to detail, because you're trying to get the maximum amount of detail in a smaller space without looking like you've put too much, it's too busy, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. One of the ones I did recently, the desert, which was Cracked Earth. I don't know if you saw it. It's a little round one. It's a mini spaceman, which was some challenge I did. And it's got the Cracked Earth base, a mini spaceman who's 15 mil high, a piece of dead twig, a vulture and a skull. And that's it. Right? It's like 4 or 5 items on there. But it's still a really captivating small diorama. And I think sometimes you can put too much in. If I look at some of my favorite dioramas, there's one focal bit to it that you concentrate on, and everything else just tells the story around it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the dangers, and I see this a lot in American, and I guess it's in the British arena as well, it's just detail. Everything gets thrown on the layout. Everything is weathered to death. And even in the 30s in America, in the middle of the Depression, they still had new stuff and people still repaired things. And how you can have a factory with giant gaping holes in the roof? You know, how did the machinery run when it got wet? You know, there's just so much overkill on detail. And I love that detail stuff, but I like it to be contained. And then I like there to be a breathing space before the next lot of detail. And I think that's where modeling somewhere like New England or England, where there's loads of greenery, is really useful, because green's very restful and it allows your eyes to travel from one scene to the next. Which isn't to say city modelling isn't also exciting, but I guess what I would say there is you probably just need some plainer buildings that are just average, that the eye skates past till you get to the next scene, because there's not someone being murdered and 20 police cars in every city. You know.
Absolutely. So are you a member of a club at all, Kathy?
I'm not at the moment. It all came down to time, and I wasn't really doing anything. But when I started, I definitely wouldn't be the modeler I am now if I hadn't gone to a club. I joined the NMRA when I started modeling American, and people say the internet is great and YouTube's great, and I agree. And as a YouTube creator, I love the idea that people can use what I do to create great stuff themselves. And I'm always really happy to help. But people will often ask really open questions like, I'm just doing my first diorama. What shall I do? And you're like, I can't answer that. And what I find is when you're in a club, you could take something along. You can invite, I had people around to my house all the time when I was first starting modeling. And they would say, why did you do it like that? And it would never have occurred to you that you were doing it in an odd way, a non-prototypical way, or just not the best way. But for someone else, it was like, why on earth are you doing that? And that, I think, is what you lack if you just do a sole lone modeler. Nobody sees your work. So if you don't know how to frame the question, or even that a question should be asked, you're not going to get the best result. Whereas if you put stuff on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, people will critique it, and you'll get some really rude stuff. And people can be rude to your face, don't get me wrong. I've had people be completely nasty about stuff to my face without realizing they're being nasty sometimes. But you know, you still only ever put the best photos forward. You may not show your staging yards. You may not show your really rubbish bit round the back. And sometimes when you see layouts that you've seen in a magazine, you kind of go, oh, because they've got like 7 amazing shots on there, which are great photos. But then the rest of it, just somehow you're like, oh, this isn't what I was expecting from those photos. And sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. But a club gives you that sort of extra viewpoint, and there's always someone willing nicely to tell you how to improve. And when you get stuck, and there's only so many times you can watch something before somebody says, do you know you're holding that wrong? Or whatever it is that you're having problems with. You just don't get that when you're self-critiquing from the internet, or when you're getting people tell you either get a barrage of, oh, that's amazing, that's the best, you know, whatever you've modeled brick building I've ever seen in my life, or you get a, oh, that's really crap. Or my favorite comment, a man would have done that better. I got that on YouTube once. It's like, someone
has slapped them.
Actually, some people get some really nasty comments. I think overall, you know, I don't really get that many bad comments at all. And a lot of them are people will say, I don't like this. And I quite often I get, I don't particularly like that bit either. So I understand where you're coming from. I feel quite lucky with that. I've not attracted a huge amount of criticism.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do feel very blessed.
Yeah, it's not, I'm quite happy with constructive criticism, but just someone saying it's for the sake of just saying it is a bit frustrating. If you're going to say
go on.
I was going to say, you can say it's bad, but tell me why it's bad. Yeah. Just don't say it's bad for no reason.
Some people write and tell you something's wrong, and you're like, but I'm copying a photo and it's a photo. You know, someone did that on my speedboat wake. You know, it shouldn't have that bit in the middle, but every photo has that bit in the middle. You know, that's what all speedboat wakes look like. Now, there are different types of speedboat wake, and maybe that person knew their particular own speedboat wake that was slightly different. I'm like, but all of this boat type that I'm doing, they've all got that bit. So, you know, you just have to, take it. And sometimes people say things that are apparently very rude. And then when you kind of query it, not in a bad way, you just query it. I think either they reread it and realize it didn't come across as they meant it, or they clarify and they actually meant something completely different, but they just, the phrase could be misinterpreted. So, you know, often sometimes you think people are being difficult and they're not. And I get asked a lot of questions by people, and I always try and answer. Sometimes it's not clear what they're actually asking, so I go back for clarity, and quite often they never come back. So you think, did you actually just want an answer, or did you just want to, you know, make a comment?
Yeah. But it's that whole thing about, you know, sending a text message compared to picking the phone up and speaking to someone. You can if you have a conversation with someone and talk to them, you can see the mannerisms and how it's meant to be said. Whereas as a text message, you can be like, what are you on about?
Yeah, email. Yeah, every written communication has that, especially when you're dealing with people from other countries, or even people whose English isn't their first language. Due respect for you to actually managing to, you know, communicate. So yes, I think you never know who's on the other end. Every now and then I'll get a very rude comment, and I'll go and check the person. Fascinating. They've never modeled anything in their life. They've never got any followers, and they never have anything, because the people who actually model aren't rude. It's just people having a bad day. So what I'm going to say, you're always going to get some people who are just weird. There we go. Don't let it get you down if you are doing it.
We've got a question, well, a statement for you. Horn Manish, I hate to see amazing layouts at exhibitions that have back scenes that look like they've been painted by 5-year-olds.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but it's so hard. What do you do for a back scene when you've got so much sky to do? Because having them printed is exorbitant. I mean, I got my last back scene printed for the Halo diorama, and that was 900mm by 450. And it was about 30 quid. You imagine doing my 12-foot square room double deck layout with it. So I painted clouds, and somebody came up in my own and just went, "Oh, I hate the clouds." What can you do? It's really hard. So I think the answer is I would always go with a quite desaturated blue sky that doesn't draw too much attention. I did grey once, just something that's not too much, and then do photo realistic for the hillsides and everything else if that's what you want to do. And I'm actually in the process of ripping out a lot of my scenery on my upper deck that's greenery, and I'm going to be redoing it with some slightly different techniques because I wasn't very happy with it for that reason. But I can't reach some of it now. It's quite hard. It's got stuff in front of it. But it is difficult. There's also the point where if you're putting a photorealistic backdrop on, if you have it really tack sharp, it's a great photo. It can also look false sometimes. So I would say just desaturate, blur them and blue them a little bit so they just recede. Your backdrop isn't your key part of the layout, and generally, unless it's a really narrow bit and it's massive. And yet you do see some that are really garish and they just draw attention from the main layout, and it's like you feel like saying just go over it with an airbrush with some slight haze of blue or something, just to, you know, tone it down so that your layout in front of it sings, because that's what we're there to see, really. But I think photo backdrops are just, it's hard to beat them now.
They are very good, but as long as they, for me, as long as they add depth to the layout, not the focus of the layout, like what you've just said. Scales and different modeling scales. What's your preference?
I like a mix, and this is going to sound really bad. So I do HO, and I can get a diorama done or a bit of scenery, and it's lovely. I can still do a detail. So I'm currently doing board by board docs, loading docs. So I've been doing board by board stuff all morning. I love it. But then I want to do a really nice weathered, rusty piece of junk, and I like 1/6 scale because I can chip it and I can do detail. And then I think, oh, but that's so big. I can get like one figure in and it's this big. It's 12 inches high, and you know, it just takes too much space. So then I go back down to S scale, which is halfway between O and HO, and then I get, oh no, so I go back to HO. So I vacillate. I do HO and double O as my main scale though. But as soon as I want to do something a little different, I'll go bigger because you can get the detail. Yeah, but I don't think you can beat HO for just, or double O for the amount you can get in, and for scenery especially, it just becomes very special. But I like ON30 as well for that same sort of, just you can do the detail.
Yeah,
I've done all the scales. I've done 1/24th, 1/35th, 1/20th, and I just it does get a bit confusing sometimes because you just, but if you get used to doing the detail, you'll transplant it back down. You were talking about this earlier, weren't you? You'll transplant it back down to the smaller scales because you're used to putting that detail in and thinking, oh, I need to do all the detail, and it will improve your fine scale modelling.
Absolutely. I said to you earlier, I started to double O and then I've gone to O, but since I've gone back to double O, my attention to detail is so much higher. And you're thinking more about what you're doing, and especially when you're planning, you tend to put more effort into planning as well. So your modelling becomes better, and you definitely think more about what you're doing.
And I think the other thing is there are some techniques that work better in different scales. So everyone goes on about the hairspray chipping technique, but I always find it a little large and I've done it in HO, don't get me wrong. I just find it, I get too big a chips. So I like that technique in a larger scale, but in a smaller scale, I'll probably just paint the chips, which I have done as well.
Okay, a couple of questions for you. Does Kathy have any inspirational model railway channels people actually follows? I think we sort of touched that earlier, but
I didn't really mention many model railway ones, I guess is why they're there. I guess I tend to do all my model railway following on Instagram. I follow quite a lot of people on Instagram, but I tend not to do YouTube on model railways. I was just wondering about that when you'd asked me earlier. I guess what I follow is scenery modelers on YouTube. And then, people like Merklin of Sweden I follow. I follow Alex and Large and Small World HO because they're also sponsored by Knock at times. So we've been on video calls together. I did a whole video call in German and I don't speak a word of German, so that was quite impressive. So there's all sorts of things, but I tend to be on Instagram for those. It's fascinating, isn't it? I was trying to think if I follow many. Jason Jensen in the US does a mix of sci-fi at the moment, but he mostly is model railroads, so I will follow some of his stuff. What I find is I tend to not follow as many channels that are not scenery or specifics. Nerd Forge, don't do any, things like that I follow, but not really sort of model railways. I'm going to shut up now. Model railway.
I was going to say, Tim, who's just asked that question, has got a channel called The Scrap Line, and he's doing scenics now. We're just into doing scenics, and that'd be worth checking out because his scenics are fantastic. So
it is. I've learned so much from YouTube watching other people's scenery, and it's quite hard not to then copy them and just to take inspiration. But I've learned so much. It's such a good way of learning. But what I often do is just do the follow next, so I end up in all sorts of places I'm not expecting.
Yeah.
I did a lot of miniature painters at the beginning of the year, so I followed an awful lot of the miniature painters but in the end I don't like painting my light because miniatures tend to paint directional light. I don't really like painting it in because I want to be able to move my models. It's a railway thing, your models move, the light isn't always from 45 degrees from the front. So I've kind of come away from that, but I spent an awful lot of time at the beginning of the year following all the miniature painters, Angel Hiraldes, NJM, just loads of different ones from that. So
have you got any advice for painting miniatures? Because I hate painting people. It's the one thing I hate doing.
I just have my standard painting method, which is base coat, prime, base coat, wash, highlight. And I do that for 99% of my stuff. And if you've looked at anything from the Mandalorian to my rock work, they all are just base coat, wash, highlight for most of them. And I do that on people. But I use different washes. I've got some army painter washes and they have a flesh tone and they have some greens and blues. And I'll use those. They're like translucent acrylics. So I'll often use those for the faces and things. But in HO, I haven't nailed it. The last really successful figure I painted had a giant umbrella over his face.
Yeah, I've just found Citadel paints, and they're like a wash, and that's definitely that's what I found quite good.
There's definitely some really good paints out there that will help, but if you wanted to learn how to look, there are some really good and very amusing miniature painters out there who will be happy to, and they've all got basics ones on their channels. I just haven't got the time to spend it. To them, the hobby is painting the miniature, whereas for me, the miniature is going in the scene.
Yeah, it's not the project, it's the whole project, if I suppose. You're not looking at the individual things. So PH Railway videos, do you have any tips for anyone with a tiny budget?
Do you know, I was thinking about this the other day. So I'm sitting there doing my craftsman kits, and the initial kit was quite expensive, but you can get them secondhand, or you can do them from scratch pieces of wood. And I was sitting there looking at what I was using, and I've had this stuff for 20 years, and I still use the same pair of tweezers, which are the slightly bent ones, the same tacky glue from Hobbycraft, which is a thicker white glue, the same train tickets, they're actually from 2013, these train tickets, and cocktail sticks to put it on. And I've got paints that I've had that period of time. I still just use those basics for 90% of modelling. Most of my scenery is still using tile grout. I've started to go to matte Mod Podge rather than PVA, just because sometimes PVA is glossy. But I still have a 5 litre bottle of PVA, matte Mod Podge, water, isopropyl alcohol. You know, and that will glue. I've used that for trees, bushes, everything. You know, no matter what else you've got. I even on the Halo diorama just use dilute matte Mod Podge for the grass. I mean, come on, you're supposed to use proper grass glue. I use PVA for years. So there are things that I would advise spending the money on when you get there. And starting out, I would say one of the things that makes a big difference is static grass. And I noticed this on the Great Model Railway Challenge. Not a lot of people actually used it. Most of them used other stuff. And if you don't want to do static grass, you don't want to buy the applicator, you can buy grass mats now. And I bought a lot of them 15 years ago, and I'm still using, but I still tear them off. And when I get rid of that, I got rid of a couple of layouts. I actually ripped all the grass back off. So I've got a big bucket full of pieces of grass. So you don't even have to buy a static grass applicator. You know, Gauge Master and some of these have always had big sheets of them. And I just think grass standing upright using a fibre product makes such a difference in realism. But you can get so much. If you go outside, you can get all that you need out of the garden, soil and things like that. Tile grout's not expensive. I've went through 1 5 kilogram bag, and I've still got most of the rest in boxes. Even sculptor molds, you know, before toilet roll went to lockdown, a lot of people made their own from plaster and toilet roll. I'd rather just buy it, to be honest. But you know, you can get it on Amazon. So I've got some that's 3 4 years old. I'm actually probably 10 12 years old I'm still using. But I think what I'm trying to say is it might seem a lot at the beginning, but you can get by with a pair of tweezers, an X-Acto blade, a box cutter for the thicker stuff, white glue, a few paint brushes that don't have to be expensive. I do think I used a tea strainer for my tile grout at the beginning, but now I've got a proper shaker. You can just keep going through with some of these basics and create amazing results. The thing that makes a model look good is layers, not necessarily the products, but the fact that you put 8 or 9 products on rather than 1. So if you just put down a road and paint it grey and say, that's my road, it will look like grey paint. If you get some cheap artists, pastels, chalks, whatever, and put a little bit of weathering on, maybe go down your local park and get a few dead leaves and whiz them up in a kitchen blender. Get permission first. I actually do have a separate blender for my modelling stuff. And then you put those on, they'll look like dead leaves along the end. Or I use chamomile tea leaves because I drink chamomile tea pre being used. You know, they're like little white, I guess it's the flowers. I use those. None of those things in of themselves are expensive. I've got some old basil that went off that I used for leaves on the autumn tree one we were talking about. You know, I think there's this thing where you have to spend a lot on the rolling stock sometimes, and on your locos, and your track is hideously expensive. But actually the scenery itself just is more about the eye and more about a few simple layers, a little bit of a few things, not necessarily buying 5-litre canisters of expensive stuff. Expensive stuff won't make you a better modeler. It will just mean you've got more to choose from.
But even like we talked about road surfaces, you could buy 3 or 4, 5 different shades of grey little tester pot paints and paint them off, paint the different shades on, and mix the paints and changing the colours and using sandpaper to change the texture and rubbing it back. And
that's why I said artist acrylics. I mean, artist acrylics are really cheap. I mean, Hobbycraft do them for about £1, £2 a tube. I like the warm grey. I don't think that's a Hobbycraft own, but warm grey just looks a little bit better than, I find some of the greys are a bit too blue, but warm grey is a really nice grey. It's very sad when you have your favourite colour grey, isn't it? Anyway, so I think you need the basics. You need a good X-Acto blade, buy loads of spare blades and a knife sharpener, and that will save you a lot of money. Just keep sharpening those blades. Don't keep buying new ones, sharpen them. And those knife sharpeners are not expensive. And then just cheap white glue. Just cheap white glue. I've done 90% of my modelling with cheap white glue. I even do my water with it. I did a whole video on cheap and easy water where I literally just use PVA to do the water. You can't pour PVA because it shrinks as it dries because the water evaporates and it will pull away from the edges. I know. But if you put it on a few thin layers at a time, it's fine. You can even do ripples. You can buy clear PVA now because if you build it up, it can start looking a bit whitey with some of the brands. But you can buy clear PVA in Hobbycraft. Just there's so much you can do with just white glue, paint, tar grout, sand.
Just the basic stuff. Really.
Bit of styrene. I've got loads of file dividers somebody gave me that were made of styrene when someone's worked through them out, and that's what I use for my styrene building still. It's just, people do amazing stuff with nothing if you look at it on YouTube sometimes. And they do stunning buildings out of just card. It's time versus effort quite often. What I do like are enamel washes, but I'm still using the MIG ones I bought 10, 15 years ago. I'm still using the same pots. I just top them up with the white spirit because I use them quite dilute. And I bought other pots, but I still always use those MIG ones. And I've had those for over a decade at least, I'm sure. Yeah.
Good quality products, and the amount you use, they just tend to last, don't they? They just keep going and going and going.
Yeah, definitely. Paints are a pain because they will go off eventually. But I have my favourites. So if you look, I've got about 6 pots of one colour Tamiya because it's just my favourite. It's one like wooden deck tan. I use so much in deck tan. Just those 1 or 2 colours that just go on everything. So yeah, I've got quite a lot of those.
Yeah, I've got on the same. I think it's XF54 I use, and I use it constantly for primer. I get through bottles and bottles of it.
And I was talking earlier, I use Halford primer, the red primer, oxide red, perfect for brickwork. You put that on and you just need to highlight your brick and all the work's done. Don't put it on foam because it might eat it, I suspect. But it is great stuff. And it's not cheap, but actually one can go quite a long way in model terms.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've
used the grey primer when I've used it for priming stations and stuff and platforms, and you just go outside, give it a quick whiz over and leave it. The next day come back and then you've had all the detail. I
don't like their white, but I use their black, grey and red depending on what I'm painting. So the black's not as much, but it's useful. But the red and the grey, stone goes in grey first and the red goes on the brick. And I just use it for everything because I want my paint to stick and it helps. And it's a good base coat.
Do you watch Adam Savage from Tested?
Yeah, sometimes. I go through phases with Adam on what he's doing. I don't really need to watch him reorganise his tool rack again. But I like some of his stuff.
Yeah, it's Star Wars modeling's very well. When he does it, it's very, very good.
Yeah. Norman Chan's been an interesting one. He gets quite a lot of, I think, unfair criticism because he's not Adam Savage. But he does some stuff that I find really accessible because he is a beginner. And, he did a great book nook that was Star Wars and used a Glowforge to cut out the lozenge shape, typical, styling on the walls and things like that. And it was just, it was great to see someone use a laser cutter like that. I mean, I don't have one. It made me very envious, but yeah.
So have you tried Quick Cut? Because that's another one that's starting to come out.
Cut just went through a huge. Did you see it on Instagram the last couple of days? They moved to subscription only to access their machines. So you buy a hardware, and then they went to subscription only, so you couldn't use it unless you paid a tenner a month, except for 20 free prints or something, cuts. And then they withdrew that when practically everybody went up in arms about a day later. But actually, my mum's got a Brother Scan and Cut, and she gave me her old one, so I've got a Brother Scan and Cut. I've never had a huge amount of luck with it. I either can't get the stuff to stick to the feeder cartridge, or it sticks too well and I can't get it off afterwards. And I've not done well. I keep meaning to do more with it, and I haven't. So it's on the list. I've got a Port de Norwich building which has got scalloped slate that I want to do out of thin styrene, and that's planned to be done on it. And I've started the SVG files, but Port de Norwich was back on the agenda for November, but then the amount of stuff I need to do to the book meant it's gone back to this sort of autumn, if then. It just keeps going back.
Did you build your own track for that? Did I see you were building points? And...
Maybe why it's stalled. Stalled for two reasons. One, I used a really weird, which I hate, tile backer board for the actual outside, which is like ceramic faced foam. So it's okay, it's there, I'll use it. But I've then got to do the track, and I've got this really odd bit where it's portable track, which the men would just put across. And I'm trying to do that automatically because it's going to be more or less sealed. You don't want to be always fiddling on the tracker. So I've got these it's really weird track work because it should be double flange wheels, and the center just moves. Yeah. So it's just weird. And I'm really embarrassed to put my track work out at the moment. So that's why it's stalled. It needs just a couple of weeks of me not doing anything else, so I can sit there and get the track done properly. And then I'll probably just do one video. And I promised Steve Flint 12 blooming articles like 3 years ago. So it's going to come eventually, I promise. Yeah. But it's just finding the time to get that track work working properly, because model railways have to run, as I keep telling them on the Great Model Railway Challenge. Otherwise, they just... Absolutely.
So talking about the Great Model Railway Challenge, I suppose this is where you really come to fame for the masses. How was it in the UK? How was it working on it, and did you enjoy it?
I did. It was really uplifting to be able to talk to so many experts and learn so much. It was just brilliant. I had so much fun meeting people, and they were so amazing. I mean, some of the stuff they produced was just out of this world. I don't know how they got it done in 24 hours. It was just perfect. So it was great. I had a great time. The production company were wonderful. I got to know Steve Flint really well, which was obviously great. But I haven't heard anything about another series. People ask me every now and then, and I'm like, I can't imagine it now. Channel 5 hadn't picked it up again, and they were looking for somebody else, but nobody else had taken it on. So I don't know. I think it's had its moment, which is a shame, because it was really accessible for people, and all my friends that aren't into model railways still enjoyed watching it, partly because I was on it, but also because they just found it entertaining. And I think at the end of the day, this is a hobby. You have to enjoy it, and that enjoyment takes different forms for different people. But this was just enabled people to see that it could be a really fun hobby.
Definitely, yeah. So was there much conflict with you and Steve about the judging? Because some of the judging must have been very, very difficult.
We never really disagreed in the finals, where you both always picked a different one. I don't know. I felt the last series, I really felt for the teams by the time they got to the finals, because it was their third layout, and they were just, it was just like, some of them were almost on the trot. They went from filming one to filming the next, and I just felt that the final was I just really felt for them all trying to produce a third layout when they obviously just hadn't had the time to prepare, because they'd only just finished their semis. So I felt that kind of the finals was when we really disagreed, because in some ways Steve was looking at the historic stuff and I was looking at the what was in front of us for the final. I think it was just a thought about which it was just really difficult. I really felt for all the people trying to do those final ones. But yeah, there was some great modelling. I wish I've seen pictures of the Grantham one when they finished it, And it's a shame they didn't get that finished, because I would have loved to have seen that working. It's so innovative. They just had some amazing ideas about, that whole funfair concept. But no, there was, stunning modelling from everybody. Just stunning modelling. Even in that final, some brilliant pieces. I just really felt for them trying to pull it all together in such a short time, because some of them had only done the previous heat and known they were going through the week before. So it just wasn't a lot of time to get your head out of one into the next. So that was the only time we really disagreed, was we picked different ones in the finals. But hey.
I didn't realise Team Grantham only had a member down. They had five team members.
Yeah, and they went from their heat to the semi overnight.
Okay.
They literally didn't go home. There wasn't any time between them. It was something to do with the way they changed how they were running the number of quarters and semis. So I don't know how they did it, but they said it's quite a long way to drive back up north. So they were happy to stay down, but I'd have been wiped out. And that's why I say some of them, I just, I don't know how they managed to put it all together.
Yeah.
In that time. It's just, creativity takes time. And for the first one, you've got that period in the run up to think about it, to think of ideas, to do some pre-building, because let's face it takes time to do good modelling. And they had all that. For the second one, a little bit more time, but then by the time you're getting into your third one, I really did feel for them.
It's hard.
Yeah, but they did great modelling against the challenge, and that was the point of the show. And they did. I can't believe people pulled off such amazing stuff in 24 hours. Really can't.
We had I don't know if you remember, we had an open day a couple of years ago, and we had a modelling challenge during the day, 5 hours to model. And we got, obviously, most of us were just normal YouTubers doing modelling, but we had Callum and Adam, who was in the first series, the Great Model Railway Challenge.
Yeah.
And because they'd been used to being in the competition and working at speed and the planning and preparation, they threw theirs together in 2 hours. And like, we looked over, we're still laying track and ballasting, and they've got, you're finished. It's quite scary.
It is. And a lot of what we do is wait for paint to dry or water to go off. If you don't mind the fact your sculptor mold's still wet at the bottom, you can get all the way up to your static grass above it. It's just time. And that actually was the big problem, was getting stuff dried. Sometimes in that, it was a set of garages almost, but obviously posh ones, but garages. And, some days it was baking hot outside. It was like an oven in there. Other days it was quite damp in the air, and, stuff just wasn't drying particularly overnight. Yeah. So they'd come back the next day and your ballast wouldn't be dry. What you can do, you can't air dry it. It's going to... No. So there were loads of heaters out on one set trying to get it done. If it rained a lot, I think we had a leak one day as well, which just missed the layout, and they were still there and they moved the layout to avoid it. So it was, people did really well, and sometimes it was like an oven in there, and other days it was really cold. So I think we did amazingly well with just that difference, because we all know that temperature difference in my loft. I can have massive gaps all the way up to my track starting to warp from it's too hot. So there's a good 20-30 degrees variation in temperature in my loft. So, it's really hard. And also, some of the people haven't done a huge amount of modelling. And there's nothing wrong with not having done a huge amount of modelling. We all started there. But then when things don't go right, you may not have the experience then to know how to fix it. And what really impressed me was how the other teams who may have that experience would then step in and help. Nobody was like, oh, it's a competition, I'm not helping you. So some of the teams that were sort of had younger or newer people into the hobby, they were just like, we'll come help you wire it. We'll help you lay the track if you're not getting it right. And that, I think, was really helpful. Yeah.
I was sort of rooting for the younger, inexperienced teams more than the experienced teams, because it's good to see new people having a go at the hobby, really.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. The first judging on the second series was really hard to just set where the bar was going to be with the point system, which we'd not used. And so it took a long time and that one took forever to judge, to work out what it was that was going to get the points. And functionality was one that we didn't really see to the end. So you'd got this view on how your layout was going to look, and then you'd see this amazing, say, volcano, and then it wouldn't be working in the final. You were like, can I judge it as in?
Yeah.
Functionality is supposed to be on the last presentation, but I know that worked earlier. It was really weird, and it just, you know, people did some really risky stuff, and some people pulled it off and some people didn't. And you know, I think the people that tried were just as good as the people that succeeded.
Definitely, yeah. We had Carol on last week from the Loco Ladies, and she was telling how lovely it was to work with you and chat with you, and she's presented you with a tree.
Yeah, it's on my mantelpiece. She did me a little crochet tree with some little snow on it, on a little plaque, and she gave me the box and everything. It's on my mantelpiece, pride of place. That was just brilliant. It was so funny. I was so rude about those on camera.
Yeah, the one thing she said that on camera you come across quite sharp at times, but you're such a different person behind when the cameras weren't looking, and the editing. And
well, I think also Steve is quite long-winded. It sounds rude, I don't mean that. Steve is a very well thought out man who will give a very considered viewpoint. I try to go for the pithy, shorter sort of comments, which when taken out of context can look a lot sharper. So to be honest, you don't want your judges to say everything's lovely, because where's the challenge? So we had to say one good thing and one bad thing about every layout, and sometimes it was hard to find a bad thing, but we always had to find one, and it'd always be that one that they used. Yeah, we were going, but that's just, you know, whatever, just because you've got to say something. And I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'm struggling to find anything bad, but the blue is wrong. You know, you just I'm not going to die in a ditch show for it, but you know, hey.
Absolutely. So I'd see if there's any questions for you coming in. So Horn Manish said he was actually a contestant on Great Model Railway Challenge. So I don't know if you know the name or who.
I recognise a lot of the names, but I'm much better on faces than I am on names, just because a lot of them did have name badges actually, but not all of them had name badges.
Okay, he said he's the team that flooded the layout with raw water.
Oh yes, no, I couldn't believe that ran. I really couldn't believe it. I was going, that's never going to run. Good judging, man. That's never going to run.
Yeah, it's like very bizarre.
And it ran much better than, and I think everybody was surprised, because they flooded it to way over the rails, and it ran perfectly. But then it was getting a bit dicky later on, and I think it does dirty the track quite quickly with that water in there, perhaps. But I was going, it must short it. Surely it shorts it.
Yeah, I thought it'd be shorting out and go. I thought it'd go bang, because water and electrics don't normally.
They didn't get it into the. And I suppose it's only 12 volts.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
I was shocked.
It still scared me though when he put water on. I thought, okay.
Yeah, I was just horrified, really. So that wasn't my loco.
Absolutely. PH Railway videos. I'm making a 16mm gauge Quarry Hunslet kit, and half the time I spend waiting for paint. So
yeah, I've got a Slater's plastic card Quarry Hunslet kit to do. Yeah, it's on the list.
So have you got many kits in your stash? Have you got is it sort of shelves and shelves of stuff, or is it
small boxes and boxes? I've got a lot of scenery kits, craftsman kits, and all of my layout is where it's got a big craftsman kit is made on a diorama, so I can pop them out and put different ones on, because I've got like 3 or 4 for each location. And so I've done about 1 so far, and I'm nearly finishing the second one at the moment that I started in 2016. So we're talking long term on these, because that's when I went into doing the videos for the YouTube. So my layout kind of ground to a halt at that point. So I have a lot of boxes. I can't find stuff though. That's my biggest problem. I know I've got a working set of Walther's traffic lights somewhere. Can I find them? No. Do I have my track pin pliers, you know, for your Cadies? Yeah. Somewhere. I now have 2 pairs, and as soon as I buy another one, I find the first set. Yeah. So, you know, I have a lot of stuff. Can I find anything? I need to go through and see. But I have a lot of craftsman kits that are wooden buildings for the US. And I will try and use them up. I try not to use them in the original kit design. I try and tweak them slightly so they look slightly different, and perhaps change the colorways and put buildings from one with a different kit so that they don't look straight out the box. But
yeah, I tend to do that. I do that with wheels. You buy a wheels kit or wheels windows or walls or something, and you put it there. You use one window out and think, I'll keep them, so I'm sure I'll use them again later on. You put it safe, and then you start another kit and you think, where do I put them windows? And then you buy another pack.
I've got so many half-started things as well. So what I'm trying to do, what I said was, I'll be a content creator and I'll spend a day a week doing my layout so it starts moving. But then I'm writing the book and feeling behind. And then there's the whole, I'm always behind on YouTube to get something out. And it's just, so my aim is once I finish the book, I'll put 1 day a week to my ebooks. And then for those, when I'm doing step-by-steps for written stuff, I might be able to take photos upstairs. But normally I just screenshot my videos for step-by-steps because I've got everything in frame and it's at 4K. So I don't know. The layout needs more love. It also needs more time. But that time has to come out my working week because I do a 6-day week. So I'm still not really there yet.
But I suppose the problem is when you're doing it all the time for work, you don't always want to do so much time for yourself, for your hobby.
I don't mind doing it for work. I can take a diorama from upstairs down and work on it. But I just don't know that a South Rhythm Model Works Cambridge Crossing Station kit is really going to be a great YouTube video, because it will probably take me 6 months to make it, because it won't, but it will take quite a long time to make. And then it's just like a station on a diorama. And I know, that isn't necessarily the most exciting thing. So then you have to look at it. So I'm doing these Bell Laboratory, which is on the High Line, New York High Line. I've been putting it on Instagram recently. I've been designing the building. I'm going to 3D print it. And I'm thinking, what can I do that will work for model railway and YouTube and everything else? Because if you just do a big building, is it that interesting for the average person to sit there and watch you? Especially when 90% of the design work is actually online. So I'm not videoing it because you do not want to watch me crashing the program for the 50th time because I put too many bricks on it. So I'm actually wondering, because it's New York, about doing a little swinging Spider-Man across the top who can swing from my upper layout.
Okay.
I don't know, but so I'm wondering about putting a little, it will be a different Spider-Man each time, but one that does this and then another one that does that, and just having that. And I think it'll be quite quirky and original. So as a model railroad, you can look at it and go, oh, that's the Bell Laboratories New York High Line. Great railway modelling, and it's on my layout. But for the person on YouTube who doesn't really give a flying monkeys about the New York High Line, you can have Spider-Man. I don't know. Still thinking about that.
It's all fun though, isn't it? So it's trying things different, and so, as long as you're enjoying it.
Of an exciting way to make a Cambridge Crossing station look really exciting for YouTube, so it looks like it's interesting, then I'm happy to hear it. But what I'll probably end up doing is perhaps doing it for Patreon and the YouTube channel as a behind the scenes. So they'll get a lot more behind the scenes on that kind of things as things go through, which I need to probably advertise more what's going up there so people know I've started to do that. So maybe at the weekend I'll start saying what I put on Patreon and the YouTube channel so people can see what's there. And it's all accessible. I don't make it that if you miss it that week you can't see it ever again. It's just there, so you could start now and you'd get all the historic ones.
And you've got your own website as well, haven't you? So you've got do you want to talk about what's on your website?
KathyMillatt.co.uk. You have to spell my surname right, but I suspect you'll find it. It's got a blog that goes back, I don't know, 10, 20 years. It goes back massively. And so it's got a lot about my railway. The big problem I found with the blog is organising it in a way that you can find things now. So I've kind of put a blog front page on that has kind of a bit about sci-fi, a bit about maybe some of the key builds that I've done, so you can follow those through into categories. But it is quite hard to find stuff, just that many years worth of blogs, and all the recent ones are generally videos. I don't put much on there at the moment that isn't on a video. So it's mostly historic stuff on the railway that's on the background there. And then I've got links to my shop and just a bit about me. In some ways, most of my stuff goes on YouTube or Instagram now, and you can get, there's an Instagram feed on the front page. And I just find that easier. The website has all the materials lists and things for the, video of the day week is. So yeah, it's interesting websites. I have a bit of a pet hate of people who post everything on Facebook and not on a website, because when you want to go back later and look at it, it's very hard to look back in time through Facebook. So when I look back and I want to remember from 10 years ago how I did that soil, it's either on a video now somewhere, or it's on my blog, so I can go back and see what colour paint I used, because I'll often have noted it, or it'll be in the picture or something. If I haven't noted it, then it's a pain. I've written it down quite often. What colour I used on the ocean for the dock, 70903, Vallejo.
Yeah, I do find that is when you're looking at, sometimes when you go to Facebook, you can't always find the post again, because Facebook tends to, once you've seen a post, they tend to hide it from you then, because you don't want to see it again, apparently.
Yeah, you can go through photo albums sometimes and go back that way. And I remember going back through all the Dormal Slow stuff. I went through all of his previous photo albums because I love his 6-scale figures, SciFi. But I don't know, it's very, very hard to follow. So I do encourage people who are trying to do it for the longer term. But then I was trying to look through someone's website the other day because I wanted a photo. I wanted to find out about a photo that was in Model Railroader that I was using for the book. It's a great photo. And I wanted to know how he'd done the grass. And it wasn't in the article. So I thought, oh, I know he's got a blog. So I went back and looked through his blog. Eventually I found it. And disappointingly, he'd actually desaturated it in Photoshop, which didn't really help me. But it was a great scene and it's a beautiful photo. But I was just like, there's just so much there. And this is the problem. Once you get to a certain point, it's just how do you organize it that people can find it? Yeah. And people can understand where you are and get there without just wading through pages and pages of, I painted my backdrop today. You know, so that's the big trouble with the website. Mine's just getting a bit unmanageable at times with historic stuff. Okay. But I mean, it's a WordPress website now, so it's much easier to manage. My first one I coded by hand. So there we go. That was hard work.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So we'll finish up. Well, we'll finish up with one last question. What do we see? What can we expect to see in the next sort of 6-12 months from you? Where are you going to go to?
So what's on my workbench at the moment is there's going to be the video on the speedboat wake, which is using foil. It's literally just foil for the water. It's so easy to do. And if you were doing waves for the sea on a coastal layout, you'd love this. It's really easy. And then, so that's on there. I'm doing the Treadwell diorama, which is this Craftsman kit, which has got a weir down the front. So the weir is the step-by-step, and I'll probably put it on YouTube, how to, you know, do an amazing scene. But then I want the back done behind it. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. And then is that I've got to do a plaster road for the book. And that's where this building's coming in, because I've ripped up the road that was there because I wasn't very happy with it. And I'm going to do this plaster road over the front. And I've never done a plaster road since on this layout. I did them on the previous one. It was awful. I put too much plaster over it. It was just sand and dust everywhere. I hated it. But I've got the Woodland Scenic Smooth It, so I'm going to have a go with that. And then once I've done that, I need to edit out all of these videos, and then I'm going to have a week off because I've got the book in. And I've got a lot more of the starting scenery. So I've got bushes, trees, buildings, details, water to come on the starting scenery, some of which are started, some of which are edited. They all need to be done. And then I'm going to hit the summer. I need to get Port de Norwich off. I've got the fun fair to do. I've got an underwater scene, which I just want to understand how to do underwater. It's kind of a clear rubber, this encapsulating thing I've got. So I'm going to try that. And I've got a couple of ones for that. And then Port de Norwich comes back off the list. And just need to keep working on whatever's new on the plate. I've got a couple more Halo ones for that coming out. It's due out holiday 2020, which is presumably American for November, December time. So when that comes out, I've got the giant warthog I'm going to do something with, and then a few more things. And May the 4th is going to be have you seen the Clone Wars?
I've not seen Clone Wars. That's the only thing I haven't seen. I've watched all that.
It was brilliant. I'm not really into cartoons, but since lockdown, we've watched all the Jurassic World ones. We've watched this. The Clone Wars was excellent. Then we watched Rebels. Worth getting Disney Plus just for some of these, actually. And the final scene of the Clone Wars, when they do Order 66, sorry, geeking out, but you know, it's just those final 3 or 4 episodes of the Clone Wars are just some of the best TV I've ever seen. So yeah, I'm doing the final scene from the Clone Wars from May the 4th.
Yeah, I watched the Jurassic Park ones, and I was quite surprised at that because I don't really do cartoons. Like you said, I don't do cartoons. And I watched the first one, and it sort of hooks you in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then what's going to happen next?
They've got 2 seasons. There's 2. There's one that's Lego, I think. We watched the Lego one, and then we watched the Jurassic World Camp Jurassic, which is like animated. That's the one I watched. There's a second series. We sat down and watched it all in one night because we wanted to know what happened. And they're like half an hour long. The Clone Wars are only about 23 minutes or something each, so they're not long. There's quite a few series. There's like 7 series, and I can't. You know, I'm normally doing stuff on my computer as well, so I'm not watching it all the time.
Yeah.
But you know, lockdown. We've been through all of Death in Paradise. We've done most of the Star Treks. We started on the Next Generation. We're now on Enterprise. I'm not doing TOS. I'm not a great TOS fan, but anyway. So we've done almost all the way through all of the Star Treks now, and there's like 50 years of them.
Yeah.
So we've been doing a lot of these lockdown ones, but I saw there's a Pacific Rim animated one, so we might go and look at that next. So yeah. So animation, surprisingly, is a really accessible way of getting at some of these things like Star Wars. If you're not into Star Wars, but that is just a stunning ending. I'm not saying anymore. That will have LEDs in it. That's probably about it.
Yeah, okay. Well, we've been on for 2 hours now, Kathy. So
I told you I talk a lot.
I don't know where the time's gone. It's just absolutely flown by. So thank you so much for joining us on the Warley channel. We hope to see you. We hope to see you in November.
Hopefully, we'll be out and about by then.
And I'll speak to you as soon as we've ended the stream. So thanks very much, Kathy.
Thanks, bye.
Well, that was an absolutely superb chat with Kathy. It's really good of her to spend so much time with us. Like I said, 2 hours have just flown by. So thanks for joining us on today's stream. And we'll see you next Wednesday. I'm not sure who I've got on next week, but I'm sure we'll have another good chat. So thanks for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you soon.